The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Wednesday, the 4th of May, 2016, are currently trading with gold at $1,274.01 an ounce, silver $17.26 an ounce, Texas crude $43.65 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently at about 448 U.S. currency. Today in history, the year 1415, Protestant Christian reformers John Wycliffe and Jan Hus are condemned as heretics at the Council of Constance. This declaration led to the digging up and burning of Wycliffe's bones, who had died a few decades before, with his ashes being dumped into a river, and to the eventual execution of Jan Hus by burning at the stake. Yet another attempt at stamping out Protestantism via the Catholic Inquisition. Today in history. In recent news, White House spokesman Josh Earnest said concerning President Obama's first visit to Flint, Michigan, in response to the lead poisoning crisis that's been happening there, that, quote, this administration will continue to help mobilize the resources necessary that will allow Flint to recover and come back stronger than ever. This is not an exercise in finger-pointing. This is an exercise in asserting the responsibility that everybody has to make sure the people of Flint have an opportunity to get back on their feet. President Obama did declare a state of emergency in mid-January and ordered federal aid in addition to the state and local response. His first priority in Flint is to be updated on the federal response to the crisis, and is even meeting with some city residents. Israel's Justice Minister, Ayelet Shaked, in an interview with the Washington Post, stated today that, quote, in the past, we've seen European leaders speaking against the Jews. Now we see them speaking against Israel. It is the same anti-Semitism of blood libels, spreading lies, distorting reality, and brainwashing people into hating Israel and the Jews. She went as far as to say that the supporters of movements such as BDS, which call for putting economic and political pressure on Israel in order to achieve compliance with international law and gain rights for Palestinians, are, quote, using the same kind of anti-Semitism, but instead of saying they're against the Jews, they say that they're against Israel. In response to comments made in recent weeks by members of Britain's Labour Party claiming that Hitler was a Zionist and previous remarks by lawmakers that Israel's population should be transported out of the Middle East to America, Shaked stated that, quote, today it is not politically correct to be anti-Semitic, but being anti-Israeli is acceptable. People who have such anti-Semitic views should not be allowed to hold central leadership positions. This is Rick Rohde with your lowdown for May 4th, 2016.
Welcome, everyone, to Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. My name is Ryan and Metzel. I will be the only host today. My friends decided to jump on a plane to Sydney, Australia, after having a wonderful time in Monaco during the World Series of Poker European Edition. And it was great. Andrew, Lucky Chewy Lichtenberger, and I believe it was the final event, ended up cashing 5th place and knocking several people out of a tournament where there was a bounty, which means that you end up receiving cash prizes for knocking people out. And I believe he knocked out at least 3 people I had heard. So shout out to him. Congratulations to him and Dave. They both were able to cash during the World Series of Poker European Tour in Monaco. So they're now headed to Australia. And with all good luck, we will have them back next week. So this week, I have a wonderful guest in the studio with me. His name is Tony Farmer. He is a local activist here in Austin, Texas. And we're going to be talking about one main thing is the Brzezinski film, which is going to be shown in a few hours, actually, 5 o'clock here at Brave New Book. So if you're listening here in Austin, Texas, you want to come down and see a wonderful film, come down to Brave New Books here in Austin, Texas, and we'll have the film. It starts at 5 o'clock. Is that right, Tony?
5 o'clock, absolutely.
Beautiful. So I guess take a second, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, Sure. How you came to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about health. I'm a certified nutrition coach. I just love helping people find a healthier lifestyle, whether that's through weight loss or increasing energy or just being more aware of the chemicals that we're putting in our body, that sort of stuff. So I've always been passionate about that since about high school. And then as you mentioned, I've really, had sort of an epiphany with that movie that you mentioned, the Brzezinski movie. The film came out in 2010. I like to digest 2 or 3 documentaries a week, I really like watching them. And this is the best documentary I've seen in my life. No overstatement there. Just incredibly well done, incredibly eye-opening, whether it's for someone who gets it. I'm using air quotes here. You can't see that in the studio, folks, but I'm using air quotes. Someone who gets it and understands that the FDA is corrupt and that things aren't quite right with the pharmaceutical industries, or for someone that is totally oblivious and isn't quite awake yet. This is a film that everybody under those 2 umbrellas really needs to see. It's fantastic. Very well done.
Beautiful. I'm certainly looking forward to it. It's one of those films where there were so many films that came out, and I was kind of at the point where I kind of already knew everything that was going on, and I actually haven't had a chance to see it yet, so I'm really looking forward to watching it at 5 o'clock today. So I'd say come on down. If you're here in the Austin, Texas area, I'll be here. Feel free to ask me any questions about, the Berk Superfoods line. We always talk about that here on the show. So if you have questions about that, I'll be here to answer those questions as well and be able to see the screening. So, there's just so many movies now that are coming out. You can call them whistleblowers, or maybe you could just call them truth tellers, because they're just telling things the way they are. People are listing their experiences, which, even under these insane FDA and, the American Medical Association laws, you're still actually allowed to do. You can tell a story about how you went somewhere, were diagnosed with something, and, this is the result. We're not allowed to say anything cures anything or does anything because we're hamstringed by, this UCC legal code. Yeah. But, we can tell our own stories. And one thing that we've done too, which is amazing, between myself, David Berk, Dr. Lisa Wampel, and Andrew Lichtenberger, we've actually written all books about our own personal stories. And we have several patients of ours that have written their own personal health stories.
Nice.
Being diagnosed with a variety of medical conditions, almost everything you can think of, and then being able to use simple things, juicing, raw foods, and yoga and meditation to be able to overcome these Western medical conditions that a lot of times doctors have told ourselves or these patients, they may not ever be able to do something again, and yet they were able to do it. So I love the underdog stories, coming back, someone telling you can't do something and you end up doing it.
It's great. We know these people, Ryan. We talk to them. You can see them. You can touch them. They're real. But when you talk to the majority of doctors and the majority of quote unquote medical experts, they'll say that it's impossible, that you can't do this without this particular therapy, or you can't do this without, the route that they're suggesting. So, it's so intriguing, so fun. It's entertaining, to talk to these folks. I think it's just really important to get their stories, those folks' stories out there, because they're real, despite what we're told from the organizations that you mentioned, CDC, FDA, AMA, et cetera.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Well, I guess, Tony, on that regard, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? Maybe, where you grew up, how you got to the point, and, maybe the major thing that kind of made you see the light and do what you're doing now. That would be great to hear, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I love telling this story, because I think it's powerful, and says a lot. So I had acne in high school, terrible acne, severe acne. You could barely see the skin tone on my face. It was red, thick acne. I went on Accutane, didn't know any better. Extremely powerful acne medication. I actually had to get blood work done to make sure that it wasn't ruining my liver. There was warnings on it about it potentially making people suicidal. Every time I popped the pill out, there was a picture of a silhouette of a pregnant woman with a red, X through it, saying, "Don't take this if you're pregnant." This is really powerful stuff. But I tell you what, it worked for me the first time. My skin did get better. It improved with the Accutane, right? Then my skin got worse. Okay. So now I go back to my dermatologist and I'm like, what do I do now? He's like, we're going to put you on another dose of Accutane. We're going to increase the milligrams. And I didn't know any better. So I'm like, all right, sounds good. I just want my acne to go away. Right. So, I go to fill up the prescription, and the best thing that could have happened to me happened to me. The pharmacist said, "Hey, you're not going to be able to fill this for $15 or whatever the copay was. Something crazy happened with my parents' insurance." And so I literally could not afford the Accutane. So at that point, I am now dejected. I'm like, I need this medicine, not knowing any better, total zombie, right? And I'm like, all right, what do I do now? So I just start researching alternative remedies for acne. I'm not a critical thinker at this point. I'm just desperate. And I see that there's this stuff called dandelion root and olive leaf out there for $10, $15 a bottle. And I'm like, why not give it a shot, right? So again, as you said, it's legal for us to tell our story. So I'm not suggesting people do what I did, but this is my story. I took dandelion root. I took olive leaf. I had tremendous success very quickly with these two things. Then the light bulb went off. Now I started to become a critical thinker and say, wait a second, what does dandelion root do? what does olive leaf do? What was wrong with me that I needed these things in my body? And I started realizing in Eastern medicine, I learned there's always been a connection between the liver and our skin.
I was going to say liver detox is what, my, I guess, Chinese medical training tells me. You take that, so I'm assuming your liver was highly detoxed, and by getting all those toxins out, it would clear up the skin. So
you're dead on, Ryan. But let's think about this for a second. What was the Western medicine approach? Remember, I was taking the medication that was making my liver worse. to the point where I actually had to get blood work done to make sure that my liver wasn't being ruined. So you had the root cause identified. Now we know it was a liver issue, right? Mm-hmm. The Western medicine approach gives me the illusion that I'm getting healthier, right? My skin gets clearer. It looks like I'm getting healthier, but it actually is making the root cause actually worse. Whereas the Eastern medicine approach would diagnose this and say, oh, you have a liver problem, therefore fix the liver problem. And as a symptom of fixing the liver problem, the skin therefore gets better. So I love telling that story because it really is a clear contrast there between the Eastern medicine approach and the Western medicine approach.
I do notice too, a lot of times, just the research that I've done on a lot of the pharmaceuticals is what they'll do is they'll actually take a substance from nature that does work, maybe the dandelion root or other things. And then what it appears is that they mix it with chemicals in order to patent it. Because you can't patent nature. You can't say Merck or Pfizer or any of these companies can't say, I own dandelion root. You're like, well, they're growing in my front yard. Like, sorry, you can't patent that yet. Although if Monsanto has enough lawyers, I'm sure they're in the process now of trying to it. So pretty soon they'll start patenting water and air. And believe me, there's plenty of people now, I'm sure, thinking about just ways to do that, unfortunately. But we're not there yet.
We're getting closer to that, absolutely. And you're dead on. And I would say that's why we don't see commercials for like celery or cilantro.
I always wonder that too. I was telling them, like, how come? Finally, you know what? When I was at home in Cleveland over last winter, I actually saw commercials for avocados, which was hilarious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're like avocados from Mexico. I was like, wow, someone's putting some money behind some of these awesome avocados in Mexico. It must be worth it.
Brain food. That's good to see.
I would love to see that though. Someone, selling cucumbers and celery and all that, like, put some money behind it. I know it's a tough thing, but if we all get together, there may be a way to do that. But I think it's one of those things where like the people in the know already know. And so they're already kind of at that self-sustainable point. And if you're not there, you're just not there yet. And so you're still watching the TV and you're watching the mainstream news and you're getting force-fed, unfortunately, all that stuff. True.
And what do you see instead of these commercials? You'll see a car commercial every once in a while, right? But it's mainly food commercials and drug commercials. And as I joke with my friends, if you don't eat the food they're advertising, you're going to be a lot less likely to need the drugs that they're advertising, right?
That is so true. Yeah, I can't remember the exact percentage of it, but I heard recently that in any non-election year, because obviously the candidates, of an election year are paying a lot of money for advertising, but pharmaceutical is a significantly large majority of all the advertising that occurs on, especially television, but I'm assuming too, any other platform that they can get their hands on, that's where they're kind of pushing that agenda.
Which is pretty darn unique to the United States. I've talked to international students, people from other countries, and they come here and they're like, wait, what? You allow pharmaceutical companies to actually advertise directly to consumers? Why? Doctors are the ones making that decision. Why are you advertising to patients? And of course, we know that that they want the patients to go into the doctors and say, hey, I heard about this on TV. Do I need this? So they're already kind of planting the seed early with the doctor, obviously increasing pharmaceutical sales, et cetera.
Definitely. Yeah, I would agree. I think part of it is the fact that you go into the doctor's office and they prescribe you something, and that's already kind of on your agenda as far as like, wait, I've heard of that. Like, where did I hear that? My friend's taking that, and I saw this on the TV commercial. So they're almost legitimizing this before you go in there and before the doctor prescribes it. Whereas if they just came out of something new and you're like, here, take this, thing you've never heard of before, it might be harder to get someone. They may actually do the research on it and they may actually look at the side effects. Whereas if they just repeat it on TV and they show a bunch of people, happy and smiling and men and women together and, the classic pharmaceutical commercials, everyone's, all roses and dandelions. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's crazy.
So where did you go from there, I guess, as far as after finding out that the dandelion root worked well for the acne, I guess, where did that lead you?
Oh, and I left out the olive leaf piece too. So olive leaf is basically a natural antibiotic and that kills bacteria. And I said, wait a second. That makes sense because before I was on the Accutane, I was on an antibiotic for my skin. So it makes sense that these things would work for me, Mm-hmm. I went to my dermatologist and I was like proud as a peacock. I go in there and I'm like, hey, you said this stuff wasn't going to work. I was like picturing this like debate in my head and he was going to be like, wow, you were right. Like, this is crazy. I need to tell all my patients about this, right? Had it all built up in my head and he just shrugged it off. And he's like, it was probably just childhood acne. You probably just grew out of it. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Wow.
So at that point, I needed to tell as many people as possible. And I just went through this stage where I did. And I had friends who had success using the same regimen and stuff like that. And that was really a mind-opening experience for me.
Beautiful. Well, on that note, we'll have more of Tony Farmer's story here on Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior after the break.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
Welcome back, everyone, to Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior here on the Logos Radio Network, 89.1 FM if you're here in Austin, Texas. I am live. I have Tony Farmer here in the studio with me, and he was telling an amazing story about how he used nature to clear up his acne before the break. And we will be opening phones up here, so anyone who's interested in calling in, the number to call in is 512-646-1984. Again, that's 512-646-1984 if you have any questions or comments for myself or Tony. So before the break, Tony, I guess we were finishing up. You're getting a little bit more into, the herbs that you had used to, reverse your acne. And I guess tell us a little bit more about where you went from there and how, you decided to help other people through what you learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So from there, I just kind of had this epiphany. I was like, wait a second. If what I was learning in the classroom, what I was learning through advertisements, what I was learning through my doctors wasn't true through this new lens that I had, what else isn't true? And so I just started exploring things even outside of health and just in general became a more open-minded person. And there's probably a lot of listeners out there that can empathize with that. They had a particular moment, a book that they saw, a book they read, a documentary they saw that kind of had that mind-altering experience. So that was that for me. Eventually I came to create Tony'sHealthTips.org, which is a website with a whole bunch of information for folks. There's over 200 health tips on there, ranging from how to identify harmful ingredients in foods to a lot of video tips, a lot of recipes, things like that. We've got some testimonials up on the website. And as you know, there's nothing greater than having someone come back and say, hey, thank you. You helped me lose 40 pounds. You helped me accomplish this health goal. I'm now off of these medications, that sort of stuff. It's so rewarding. But again, it never would have happened if that billing issue hadn't have happened with the insurance. So thank you, insurance companies. Thank you, Accutane, for setting me up on this path.
They cut you off from your from the drug supply. Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe for Obamacare, we'll just cancel everyone's insurance and everyone will get healthy. That probably would work, actually.
It's so true, man. And on a serious note, I want to remind people that sometimes, when terrible things happen, they can turn out to be really good things. Because if you had told me at that time, hey, Tony, it's going to be okay. We'll find some other alternative for you. It'll end up being a good thing. I would have said BS, So whether it's in life, whether it's with breakups, whether it's with relationships or just getting bad news at work or getting fired or, whatever it may be, sometimes those really terrible things that happen to us in life can turn out to be blessings in disguise. And I think that the story that I shared with, me not being able to fill my Accutane medication is a really good example of that for sure.
Yeah, a lot of times I notice too that people have to hit a certain point before they're willing to make a change. And it sounds like that either people end up being in so much pain and suffering that they decide to make a change, or just the nature of the universe, I guess maybe more politely, just changes the insurance and so you can't fill this prescription. As opposed to some people, their insurance won't cover something and so they have to end their chemo or they have to end all these different therapies that they've been used to getting, and their only choice is to go somewhere else because, they just can't deal with the amount of pain they're in. And at the clinics that I've, worked with and helped manage with David and Dr. Lisa, I saw that a lot of times people would come in and they'd be like, I've tried everything else. This is like my last option. And I just wish I could get the message out there to people to don't make this the last option. Make this, it doesn't necessarily have to be the thing you go to first, but at least make it equal. Don't just automatically, your doctor says this, you can get a second opinion. David always likes to say that on the show here. You can ask your doctor for a second opinion. You can see another doctor. Yeah. You can see someone such as Dr. Ashley Maltz, who we had on the show here, who actually has her actual MD medical degree and has done a lot of studying in all the different alternative medicines as well. So she can give you that broad range of, anything from pharmaceuticals and blood tests to all the herbs, nutrition, and acupuncture. So
absolutely.
I'd say the person you go to that has the most tools in their toolbox usually is going to be able to fix the most problems or do the best job at it. So
yeah, good point about the getting a second opinion. When we go to buy a car, usually go to a couple different dealerships, right? When we go to buy a stereo, we'll often shop around and make sure we get the best one. But for some reason, when it comes to our bodies, when it comes to our health and our own well-being, we'll often just take that first opinion and not seek a second opinion and seek other options, which is kind of funny. It reminds me of what Dr. Wallach says, something to the extent of, hey, we put 6 quarts of oil in our car to keep it going, right? We don't wait for the engine to burn out before we address the problem, right? It's this preventative maintenance idea. Yet for us, with the American society, we typically take that burnout approach and don't address a health issue until we have a problem, which is really kind of a backwards approach, really.
That's very true. And it's very interesting, too, the amount that most people trust their typical medical doctors versus how little amount of time those doctors actually spend with them. I just remember when I was little and you'd actually go in to see the doctor and, you'd fill out paperwork. And this has been a long time because I haven't been to the doctor and I don't even remember when. It's probably, before college. But, you go in and then you fill out the paperwork and then you're waiting and someone else comes in and does all your blood pressure stuff. And then the doctor comes in, oh, okay, you're this, boom, and hands you a prescription and leaves. And people somehow get a lot of, I don't know if it's respect or just whatever for someone who really doesn't spend much time with them.
Right.
And versus, people would come into the clinic that we would have and see Dr. Lisa and Dave, they'd spend sometimes hours, days sometimes, like, hey, come over to the house and we'll all make food together. And I think that's so missing from Western medical. Whether or not it works or not, there's so little time put into every individual patient. It's almost like, a mill, just like get the people in, boom, 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 hand out the prescriptions, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
As opposed to actually taking that individual approach that Chinese medicine likes to do is treat everyone as an individual, treat others as you want to be treated. And I don't think many of these doctors, that are doing this would like, if when they have a health issue, they don't want to go see someone, have them spend 2 minutes with them, hand them a prescription and leave.
Right.
So I don't understand why they're doing that to everyone else. I can't put my arms around it other than they're trying to pay their school, loans.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it comes down to priorities. If their priorities was truly making people healthier, then you would see that approach, right? But I think the priorities is the money, as you said, paying off the loans, paying the bills, And I want to throw out there, I think most doctors are really, really good people. Most doctors are fantastic people that get in the field for the right reason. This is really, in my opinion, I don't know if you agree, this is really a systemic issue that they're put in kind of a tough situation. It's really a systemic concern, I think.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I do think that the majority of the doctors are truly trying to help people, or at least they originally went into it with the idea of trying to help people. And I think that they've got such a veil placed over them a lot of times through the medical school and doing their, the practical, because I think it's only a couple hours of nutrition that they get.
If that.
Versus when, I know when I'm talking with someone or all that, you can we have amazing herbs, Burke Superfoods line, amazing line you can get here at Brave New Books. And we have everything from, all the different types of proteins and all the different, macas and valerian roots and all this incredible, ginsengs and stuff that works really well. But on its own, if your diet isn't correct, that stuff is only going to go so far. Right. And we tell everyone that, I love all the different, having access to all of those, but if you're not eating a clean, healthy, nutritious diet, you're only going to get a little bit of results from that.
Right.
And it's the same thing with the pharmaceuticals
water
too.
And all those things.
And the doctors never say that. It's almost like, here, take these pharmaceuticals and everything's going to be all right. They don't mention no, you really need to change your nutrition. Right. Because, if you are taking, say, one pill or even 3 times a day versus how much food are you putting into your body?
Yeah. Absolutely. A good example of this is we'll go back to the cancer topic. Cancer patients, we know that cancer loves sugar. We know that. So every single doctor that is talking to a cancer patient should have at least a brief conversation to say limit or reduce your sugar. Right? That should just be a staple that's happening. And I think that's starting to happen. We're starting to see a little bit of that with Western medical doctors. But again, it should be a standard when it is that black and white. It's that clear. We know these processed sugars especially, man. We know that they're contributing to growing cancer.
Absolutely. And the other one is the alkaline environment, I guess I would say. And I believe, so Dr. Otto Warburg in 1931 won the Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine for showing that cancer cannot survive in an alkaline environment. Right. And so I don't know why, like you just said, they're not saying this too. Like, look, you have cancer. Cancer can't survive in an alkaline environment. It thrives in an environment with sugar. Right. So if you want to change this, the results speak for themselves.
Right, absolutely. And by the way, what is one of the quickest ways to take you out of an alkaline environment? A lot of people think like eating, a food that's not alkaline, it's stress. And how stressful is it to have cancer in the United States when all those bills are pouring in?
Absolutely. Great point on that. So here after the break, we will be here to reduce your stress. Stay tuned.
Blame it on bottled water or changing tastes, but in the U.S., sales of milk have slumped to their lowest level in decades. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. In a moment, I'll talk about why Americans are drinking far less milk.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Chocolate chip cookies and bowls of cereal must be feeling lonely because milk consumption in America has slumped to an all-time low, with more than half of adults no longer drinking it at all. Last year, total milk beverage sales were about 6 billion gallons, the lowest since 1984, far behind soda, bottled water, and beer. So what's going on? Consumer tastes have changed. Energy drinks and bottled teas have arrived, and the public is afraid of the antibiotics and synthetic hormones used on cows. But don't worry, milk lovers, there is some good news. Organic milk sales are up 20%, even while regular milk sales fell. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com.
Welcome back to Austin, Texas, and the beautiful Nourishment for the Spiritual Radio show, Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior radio show here on the Logos Radio Network. In the studio with me, Tony Farmer, activist here, and we've been telling an amazing story about, his own personal, trials, I guess, with health challenges and how he's able to overcome that just through utilizing nature, essentially. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we got to how, possibly reducing sugar can help people that have cancer, and also getting yourself into more of an alkaline environment, as referenced by Dr. Otto Warburg. And so from there, where do you want to go from there, Tony, I guess?
I think we're going to be getting a call soon from a gentleman named Dustin Canary, who said he's going to call us in about 5 minutes. And so I would like to play a little bit of testimony from his mom. So those of you, again, of course, in the radio, you don't have a visual here, but I want you to envision a little, I think he was 4 years old at the time, a 4-year-old boy on his mom's lap in front of Congress. And so the testimony that you're about to hear is Dustin's mom. Now, Dustin's grown up today. He's in his mid-20s. He's a firefighter. He's a very healthy young man. But at the time that this testimony was taken in the mid-90s, Dustin had a tumor in his brain. And so that's just kind of a way to set up the clip. I believe the congressman is Congressman Barton, I believe, is the person whose voice you're going to hear to start off the clip.
And this is the Brzezinski movie clip, Marianne Kunari testimony, if you're looking for this on YouTube. And it's the Congressional Subcommittee hearing from February 29th, 1996. So let's roll.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
From Aurora, Minnesota. So.
This is Dustin Canary, and he's on Dr. Brzezinski's anti-neoplastin treatment. This is my husband, Jack Canary. Now, in February of 1994, our lives were drastically changed. My son, Dustin, was only 2.5 years old at the time. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of a golf ball. The surgeon removed 75% of his tumor, and the remaining 25% was diagnosed from a biopsy as a malignant, very aggressive medulloblastoma brain tumor, one of the most deadly forms of brain cancer. The doctors told us Dustin had only a few months to live. The first treatment offered us was radiation, but the radiation doctor told us that at his young age, Dustin would become a vegetable, and it would only extend his life for maybe a few months. The next doctor wanted us to enroll Dustin in an experimental chemotherapy, which was highly toxic. The side effects would include hearing loss, kidney and liver damage, bladder, stunted growth, and a possible leukemia. One question I would like to ask is, would you do that to your child? We weighed the harm these experimental drugs would cause against the fact that they would not cure Dustin, and decided not to subject him to these drastic measures. But our oncologists told us that their opinion took precedence over us as parents. This put added stress to the already stressful situation we were in. In April of 1994, we visited Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski in Houston. Dr. Brzezinski made us no promises, but said that he often had very good results with brain tumors. At worst, it would not hurt Dustin, and it offered the best hope and a longer quality of life. An MRI 6 weeks after we started Dr. Brzezinski's treatment revealed no tumor. We were very overjoyed. Dustin continued anti-neoplastin therapy, and 1 year later, a tumor 1 inch by 1 inch in size was found on the MRI. That would be April of 1995. Dr. Brzezinski immediately raised Dustin's dose of anti-neoplastins. There were still no harsh side effects at all. The next MRI in September of 1995 revealed that the tumor had almost disappeared again. To this day, it has not reappeared. If you look at Dustin right now, he's a happy, healthy 4-year-old who has outlived his prognosis. There is no traditional treatment that would have kept him alive with such good quality of life. FDA Commissioner David Kessler loves to grab headlines as a man who loves children so much. He wants to protect them from the ravages of smoking. If Dr. Kessler loves children so much, why have he and his agencies been trying so hard to cut off my son's last hope for life? Without this treatment, my son will die.
Wow, that was quite a powerful clip. So we do actually have Dustin on the phone right here. So I'm gonna go live to him. Dustin, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great. We just watched the clip of you. I guess that was at the testimony.
Yes, congressional testimony sitting on your mom's lap. This may be a silly question, Dustin. You don't remember that day, do you?
Actually, I do.
Wow. Can you tell us what you remember about that?
Well, I don't remember a lot, but growing up, I was going to that hearing, and there's a few other ones from the FDA and Texas Medical Board. And my family went to, I think we went to all of them, but that one in particular, I remember because I was sitting on my mom's lap and just like any other kid, not really knowing why I was there. But my mom started crying, and I do remember looking at her and wondering, why are you crying? I guess I didn't really understand what was going on.
And you know, that clip is in the movie Brzezinski, which again, we're going to be showing at 5 p.m. here at Brave New Books. And I'd say that's a really pinnacle, really huge point in the movie. There's a lot of congressional testimony. I know when I watched the film the first time, that scene really got me. And it's tough not to get choked up and get goosebumps and get emotional when you watch that, because it's really, the love from your mother is so apparent in that clip. It's really heartwarming.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what else can you tell us, Dustin, about Dr. Brzezinski? Keep in mind, you know, we've got listeners who know very little about Dr. Brzezinski. So can you just kind of take us through what you think of the man and take us through your experiences with Dr. Brzezinski?
Yeah. I don't remember a whole lot. I guess I probably remember more than I would have if I wasn't going through such an ordeal. But we went to him when I was 2.5. The remaining 25% of my tumor contained cancer. And I remember having to wear a backpack with the anti-neoplastins inside of it. It was a little pump that I wore, 2 bags of medicine, and it would kind of circulate through my body on a regulated, whatever the pump was set to. So I remember wearing that, and it was heavy. I remember getting breaks from that now and then, and that was nice. But yes, I remember about the clinic, I remember the staff being extremely friendly. I would go from door to door asking for, or not even really asking, people showering me with gifts, and my mom didn't really appreciate. But I remember seeing a lot of other children there one day and then not seeing them the next time I went. We live in northern Minnesota, but we made many, many trips down to Houston, Texas, where Dr. Brzezinski's clinic.
Dustin, that's amazing. Can you stay after the break? We're coming up to a break here.
Sure.
Oh.
Easy.
Descends to the earth, a time when the mind is defined and confined. We the people need to realign with the divine. A government for the people, by the people realigns. No more taxation without representation. It's time for the people to have their say. No longer the prey. Aligned with truth, there's nothing we cannot do, divide and conquer lies and false promises. These are the archonic weapons of hurtful decay. The abundance of the earth is the perfect technology, and the golden age is now. Rise together as one in peace and prosperity.
Welcome back to Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. On the phone right now, we have Dustin Kunari, and we just played the congressional testimony from his mother, which was amazing and powerful, I would say. I don't know how you could watch that and not see the love a mother has for her child and for just the desire of someone to want to heal and, help someone so close to them. So I guess, Dustin, you were talking a little bit more about, your healing process and going through that. Could you take us through a little bit more about, what you remember back then and I guess how that got you to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I was saying before the break, just remembering the friendliness of the staff, and there's a lot of children who weren't as fortunate as me to have antineoplastons before anything else, who came to the clinic after they had failed antineo or had failed, traditional means, be it chemo, radiation, whatever it was. And I would see them. They were doing, I didn't realize they were sick. We're all kids and we're just playing with each other. But one day they'd be there, and the next day wouldn't be. And I learned later in life, that. Well, I would ask my mom at the time, where'd they go? And there's many children that I knew and was good friends with that passed away because they didn't have, they weren't as fortunate as I was to have the antineoplastons. But from then on, I just always remember, like I was saying before, we went there a lot. Staff is always friendly, very professional, and I actually became especially to Mrs. Brzezinski and all, whoever the staff was. There's a lot of various people over the years, but the Brzezinski family and lots of the patients that did well, Mary Jo Siegel and Paul Michaels and many others we've made such a close connection with over the years just through Dr. Brzezinski. And I remember we all were fighting together when Dr. Brzezinski was when the FDA was after him, and just the close bond we can all have through this incredible man who's just trying to do what's right for his patients. I was at the hearing the last few days in Austin there.
Hey, Dustin, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because we haven't mentioned the hearing, so I want to pick up with you in a second, but just to give folks some context. So Dr. Brzezinski is on trial right here in Austin. The trial started May 3rd. It's going to wrap up on the 13th. So the trial that Dustin is referencing is the Texas Medical Board is trying to get Dr. Brzezinski's license taken away from him. And as Dustin referenced, this man has been going through quite a fight. First, it was the FDA coming after him. I mean, we're talking about decades of legal battle here that's been going on. And some people would say, sounds like they're just trying to distract him or drain him of his financial resources. They just keep taking him to court. He keeps winning in court over and over. It's incredible. So go ahead and take off where you left off there, Dustin, with viewing the trial.
Sure. Okay. So I didn't obviously understand how intelligent he was as a young child, but when he was testifying and just his attorneys were giving some background on him, he is such a brilliant man. The things that he has retained in his head for the last 50 years, just the knowledge and the research and the science that he's done that is proven over and over and over again. It's not toxic. It's not harmful. It heals without side effects. I remember when I was going through the treatment, I had diarrhea, and that was it. I wasn't deaf. I wasn't blind. All these lists of side effects that would have happened if I had chemo, nothing were there. Just a little sick,
Right. Yeah, it would have increased your chances of getting other forms of cancer, potentially leukemia and stuff like that had you gone the traditional route. So good point in mentioning that it's non-toxic as well. Any other insights from the trial itself? I know there's been demonstrations outside about an hour every single morning before each day of this trial. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience or other things that you witnessed in the courtroom for folks that weren't there?
Yes. The demonstrations, I feel, I hope, are making an influence. The first day was kind of disappointing. We saw a news van drive by, and I know you, Tony, had contacted that news station several times trying to get publicity to it's a pretty big trial. Of course it is to me, but if the American people understood what's at stake, I don't think there'd be a lot of unhappy citizens. But anyways. Yeah. But we did, it seemed, have some support from the passersby. We had some people honking horns and some random people that came up and talked, and we told them the story, and many seemed to be very interested in what's going on. And I appreciate that. Anything we can do to spread the word around that Dr. Brzezinski is not a quack at all. But
absolutely.
On to the trial, I felt the Texas Medical Board's attorneys were amateur at best and not at all professional. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I don't know a lot about law, but I've watched trials in the past, and I feel like they are not at all prepared when they've had numerous. They've had a lot of time to be prepared. Not a lot of time to be prepared, unlike Dr. Brzezinski's attorneys who've had 6 months. it's kind of sad to see that the best Texas Medical Board has to offer is some people who haven't even been out of law school for more than 10 years.
Such a good point, Dustin. And, I'll remind folks, too, that when we're talking about the Texas Medical Board, we're talking about your tax dollars at stake, Texas listeners. Yeah. And so this man who's already been vetted and already been through court so many times by different, whether it's the FDA, this time it's the Texas Medical Board, they are wasting money. So I know we have a lot of libertarian-minded listeners out there. So that's just another angle. On top of the lives that are being saved, on top of the ludicrousness of it all, money is being wasted as well. So I thought it was important to point that out to listeners too. Dustin mentioned the demonstrations each day before the trial. If this sounds like something that you want to get involved in, 8 to 9 a.m., 15th Street, downtown Austin, 300 West 15th Street, downtown Austin, across from the DoubleTree. A lot of our Dr. Brzezinski's former patients had to fly out last week, and so we could really use some numbers out there to support Dr. Brzezinski. You will literally get I can't promise, but you'll get the opportunity to shake Dr. Brzezinski's hand and wave to him as he walks right by demonstrators and goes into the courtroom. So a great opportunity to support him if anybody out there is interested in that. Dustin, we've asked you a few questions. Anything else that you want to add or mention questions maybe we haven't asked?
Yeah, I would like to add one thing. I did have a chance to talk to the lead attorney on the case for the prosecution. Her name's Amy Swanholm. Sorry. I saw her in the hallway, and I felt like I had to say something to her. So I approached her and I just asked her if she knew who I was. She said she didn't. In brief, it was on a break. I didn't have a lot of time, but I told her, I'm Dustin Canary. I was healed by Dr. Brzezinski 20 years ago. I've been in remission for 20 years. Wow. I just want you to know who you're trying to take the license away from. And without his license, if you shut him down, there'll be people that are going to die. I kind of cut to the chase there. I wish I had more time to talk to her, but she told me, I understand. And, she shook her head. She agreed with me. She understood. And Steve Siegel was also there, and he said, why are you doing this then? Is it for money? And she got defensive right away. Well, actually, Steve didn't even mention money, but they both said, well, it's not for the paycheck. So it's interesting because she then said her grandmother was going through cancer, or a relative. I can't say exactly who it was. I don't remember for sure, but a close relative of hers. She said, I can relate. They're going through pancreatic cancer.
Wow, the irony there. Wow.
Yeah,
Dustin, I just got goosebumps when you were, I don't want to say confronting, but that might be too harsh of a word, but when you were having this conversation, I just got goosebumps. The fact that you had that opportunity. I heard you say that, you had to say something, and I'd imagine, was that somewhat therapeutic to kind of get that out there? That had to feel good to some level, no?
It felt good in a sense that at least what you're doing, like I was saying, Steve Siegel said, fellas, the people are going to die, and that's on you. That's on you. I want you to know the long-term ramifications of what you're doing. And they said, we understand, we know. So it was, she herself told me, I appreciate your courage coming to talk to me because that takes a lot of courage. And in my mind, I was saying, why would it take courage to talk to you? You know what I mean?
Wow. Wow. Wow.
It meant nothing to them. It meant absolutely nothing. They're there to do what they're hired to do. And I don't know.
I had a similar moment, not nearly as profound because I don't have the experience that you had, Dustin, but when I was in the courtroom as well, I approached a gentleman and I said, hey, are you a Brzezinski supporter as well? And he said, no, I'm with the Texas Medical Board. And I said extremely politely, over the top politely, I said, well, thank you for coming down here and hearing it from the horse's mouth, because Dr. B was on the stand that day. And he just laughed. Yeah. I was completely polite and thanked him, for not making assumptions and actually hearing from Dr. B. And he just literally laughed at me. So, this is the folks that we're dealing with here. And folks, the Texas Medical Board office is right here in Austin. So I can picture demonstrations even after this trial's gone. I can picture demonstrations outside the Texas Medical Board because, we need to shed light on the money that's being wasted and the lives that are being lost for sure.
Yeah.
Dustin, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to mention, too, that I think Austin's buzzing a little bit about Brzezinski. Not only have we had the demonstrations, we also had a showing at the Alamo Draft House of the world premiere of Dr. Brzezinski, the film Brzezinski, Cancer Cure Cover-Up. We had over 100 people come out. The film director, Eric Marola, was there. By the way, he's going to be here again at Brave New Books, 5 p.m., Brave New Books on Guadalupe Street in downtown Austin. Come check out the film, talk with the film director. There's going to be a great community of people here talking about the film afterwards as well for those listeners out there. But thank you so much again, Dustin. Did you have any questions for Dustin?
No, that was wonderful, Dustin. I appreciate you coming on the show and, giving us your own personal opinions and experiences, which cannot be refuted by the American Medical Association or the FDA. So thank you very much for that. And to all the listeners out there, I'm sure they appreciated, hearing it directly from you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
You got it, Dustin. Thanks so much. We'll keep spreading your story, man. Thank you.
All right. right, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. There goes Dustin Kunari. That was an incredible testimony. So, if you missed that, definitely come out to the film tonight, 5 o'clock here at Brave New Books. We're coming up to our main break here at the hour, but stay tuned for more Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. You are listening to Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior here on the Logos Radio Network, 89.1 FM in Austin, Texas. We just had an amazing segment beforehand with Dustin Kunari with a clip from the Brzezinski movie about his mother's testimony in Congress. And so anyone looking to see that, again, 5 o'clock here, Brave New Books, downtown Austin, Texas. The showing is free. We're going to have some amazing people associated with the film here to answer questions. And on top of that, we were talking a little bit during break about, the money involved in all of this and how, unfortunately, the majority of these companies that are in this health care business, and again, like Obamacare, I think I would say it's a health does not care business, and Obama does not care, because when you really look at the research and what they're providing for people, it's not what people deserve, in my opinion. If I want to treat everyone else the way I want, the way they were going to treat me, I would not treat people the way that these companies are treating them.
Good point.
And so, here's an interesting Mayo Clinic study where nearly 7 in 10 Americans take prescription drugs, and more than half take 2 prescription drugs. And so, suddenly, if like from nature, we were able to get this stuff at little to no cost, how much money disappears suddenly from the coffers of these corporations?
Absolutely. I mean, literally, folks. If you're listening in your car, if you're listening at home, just try to do the math. I mean, half of the people in the United States are on 2 prescription medications. Now, you know what you pay with your copay if you happen to have insurance, but think of the actual cost of those pills over the course of people's lifetime. We are talking about a dollar sign that the average human can't even comprehend. And this is really what we're up against when we're talking about this fight against Big Pharma. And, we had Dustin on and he was talking about the demonstrations outside of the courthouse for Dr. Brzezinski's trial. He mentioned that a media van drove by. I'll tell you what, I used to work in journalism. I know how to write a press release. I know how to write a professional press release. I know how to get the press's attention. I contacted news agencies in Houston. I contacted news agencies in Austin. Believe me, they knew this was going on. We had people who have been cured of cancer right in Austin with signs screaming at the top of their lungs. And the news apparently didn't think that was a story. And so I go on KView in a local Austin news agency, and I'm like, well, what are they reporting on instead? It must be pretty important if they're going to decide not to report on a cure for cancer. So there's a story about the staff at KView, what they're doing for Mother's Day. And it's this fluff stuff that is not news whatsoever. And so it's really interesting to me that the media is ignoring this. And, I was handing out flyers for the event at the Alamo Draft House where we had more than 100 people show up. And I met a lot of wonderful people here in Austin, a lot of open-minded people, and they went to the film because they got my flyer. But then there was also some people who wanted nothing to do with it. And here I am. I feel like I'm peddling the cure for cancer. I say that metaphorically, of course, on these flyers, and people are just not interested in it. And for me, I'm so passionate about this. I don't understand how this is not interesting to people. We live in a society where 40% of us are going to get some form of this devastating disease in our lifetime in the United States. And by the way, it's rising. So if you're 20, 30, 40 years old out there, by the time you're 60, 70, it may be a 1 in 2 chance. It may be even greater than that. Okay. This is a big deal. I don't know how to get people more excited or more interested in this. There is a cure for cancer. Dr. Brzezinski has patients who will tell you their stories about their cancer being cured without chemo and radiation after they were literally left for dead by the Western medical establishment. Some of them have been told, don't even bother with chemo and radiation because you're too far gone. Just enjoy the last month or so of your life. And by the way, that was 15, 16 years ago. Stories like that are just incredible, and they've got the medical records to prove it.
Well, it sounds like you're peddling the drug of knowledge, Tony, and unfortunately, that is a drug that not everyone is ready to swallow at this point. So
true, so true.
But yeah, it's really interesting. The court the court case that Dustin was talking about, which I guess was somewhat recently with Dr. Brzezinski and how he had talked with the prosecutor, brings up a really interesting point. And I know, I'm not sure if anyone out there has heard, I'm a big fan of, but Mark Passio. And he brings some great information as far as the idea of order followers. And it sounds like this lady here may have falls into that realm of the order follower, whereby she may know, what she's doing is wrong, and it's actually even affecting her and her own family. But she's so far gone, she's just taking order from the person above him, and they're taking orders, and they're taking orders, and then you end up in possibly one of these concentration camps, and it's all just a bunch of people following orders because, well, that person told me to do it, and this person, and just a bunch of people that can't think for themselves.
Well, it's funny you mentioned concentration camps, because that's immediately what I thought of was Nazi Germany when, we use the expression just following orders. I mean, folks realize that was the defense of actual Nazis who were on trial during the Nuremberg trial. That was their defense, their rationale. Well, someone told me to do it. And so it is certainly concerning when we see that same rationale being used. And again, we're making some assumptions here. We don't know for sure that was the rationale of this prosecutor, but when, according to our last guest, she acknowledges, I know, but I'm still doing this. Gosh, that's really discouraging. Wow.
And that guy that was just laughing too, who obviously knew the whole system and knew it was just a joke, and you're just like playing courtroom games, and that's really all it is. It's just one big game, and everyone's out there, playing their own cards. And unless you're like on the in team and you understand what kind of a game it is, you're going to get played, and that's unfortunately what ends up happening. And it's really sad. People don't realize people's lives are at stake, and it's all because they want how many cars can you drive at the same time? How many mansions can you have? How many airplanes can you need? It's almost laughable the way these people are. And I can only imagine how miserable they are. And I know Alex Jones talks about this all the time too, just about, and I've met too, so many of these extremely rich and wealthy people who you think should be happy because they have these supposedly great businesses and all this money, and they're the most miserable people you've ever met in your entire life. And it's because they know when they go home and look in the mirror, they're complete frauds. Absolutely. And they're just archons. They're living off the energy of everyone else. And it doesn't matter how much energy they have. It's not theirs. It's not their creation. And they're hurting people in the process.
I completely agree. And I think some of those folks gravitate toward power because that sort of masks it a little bit. They can't find happiness in the more natural ways, like helping people and things like that. And so I think power sometimes is the drug of choice of these folks because that kind of sustains them. It's not a good long-term solution, but that helps them feel a little bit better in the short term.
No, that definitely makes sense. I guess the idea of psychopathy and, the psychopaths gravitating towards these power positions, whether it's politics or some of these higher level, academic institutions or medical where, they don't have to deal with everyone, but they're in the position of power. They get to give the orders to these order followers, and just that ability to give that order is really what, sustains them through their day. And as sad of a life and as sad of an existence that is, we have to deal with those people. And it's almost just as simple as us coming together and just deciding, look, we don't need you anymore. Like, just leave. And we're going to withdraw, and we're all going to work together and help each other out. And your system is not necessary anymore. Like, good luck with that.
Absolutely. There's a great documentary called Happy out there that really analyzes how people in countries with a lot less tangible items are actually, when they measure it, happier than many Americans who have, the iPhones and the iPads and, all these devices and stuff. It's a fascinating concept for sure.
No, I did see that movie, and that was wonderful. Yeah. And it's almost like, how do we bridge that gap between, there's nothing wrong with technology in itself. And if we can work together, we can use this technology to actually separate ourselves from these individuals, these psychopaths and people that have taken control. And it's using this medium. I mean, honestly, I find more truth in Snapchat than I do in Fox News and CNN, to be honest, because it's just people being real. It's like they're right there, they're taking the picture, and there's the whole selfie thing and all this. But at the end of the day, at least people are doing something and trying to promote something other than just taking orders from all these news networks and media that everyone knows is a joke. I think there was one poll, it was like 6%. There's like 6% of people are believing it, or I forget exactly what it was, but it was so laughable.
Well, the media, and this again is an industry that I used to work for 3+ years. The media has lost so much credibility with the average person because they've gotten caught doing things, whether it's, mainstream media companies doctoring photos, or whether it's just them being caught in lies or them censoring things. And I've got a question for the listeners out there. If you had a best friend, a close friend, who continually lied to you over and over, and you could prove it. I mean, right to your face, right? They harmed you over and over. They were wrong about things that then ended up hurting you over and over. Eventually, you'd end that relationship with that friend, I'm guessing, right? You'd be like, hey, I'm done. I'm going to walk away, right?
Makes sense.
But for some reason with media, some people, again, you mentioned the poll, 6%, many people still, 6% of all Americans is still a lot of people. So many people still trust in the mainstream media after all of their blatant mistakes. And that's interesting why that's taking place.
Yeah, it looks like it was from a Breitbart article. The 6% of people say they trust the media, which I think is absolutely hilarious. I mean, 6% is like so low. It's like the only people who believe in it are probably themselves. Like they're voting for themselves, right?
And their moms, their family members and stuff.
Yeah, just like I always laugh with Dave, and we're always joking about why is Harvard the best school? It's just because they vote themselves, right? They own the publication. So everyone make sure you go to those Ivy League schools. Like after they keep voting themselves about how smart they are.
Absolutely unbelievable. And that same analogy I said about trusting the media can be said for the CDC, the FDA. I mean, hey, FDA, you got blood on your hands from Vioxx. We still trust them, right? Hey, CDC, you completely botched the rolling out of Lyme disease. You laughed at the activist that was telling people about Lyme disease and told the media publicly that she was crazy. I'm talking about Polly Murray back in Connecticut in the 60s or 70s. You completely were wrong about that. These organizations are wrong over and over. Hey, remember when we were told that margarine was healthier for us than butter because margarine has less fat in it? Oops, it actually clogs arteries and promotes inflammation. Sorry about that. They are wrong over and over. Medical science is wrong over and over. And the people who are suggesting that they might be wrong again are often ridiculed, called conspiracy theorists, laughed at, but really just they have a pattern of being wrong, lying, etc. So just open your eyes and see that pattern could possibly continue.
No, that is true. And again, you can look for yourself, but there's 6 corporations that own 90% of the media. So they're just repeating it over and over again. There's some hilarious shows of just showing commercials and different newscasters just saying the same thing over and over again. And it's funny you brought up the Vioxx. Actually, when I was an undergrad at Emory University and I was doing track and field there, we were actually tested on. They just gave out Vioxx to us like it was candy.
Oh my God.
To the kids. And I saw these studies now in Dave and Elisa's Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior book. Like 50,000 people were injured or died as a result of it. Wow. And they were just giving it to a bunch of college kids like candy. You're like, oh, wow. You have shin splints? Here, boom, Vioxx, as much as you want.
Holy cow.
It's just completely insane. So we're coming up to our break here. We actually have a call. We have Steve Siegel on the line, so we'll go to him after the break. Stay tuned here on Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior on the Logos Radio Network.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Back to Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. We have a caller we're going to go to. This is Steve Siegel.
Steve, can you hear us?
Steve, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. You are live here on Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. Great to have you, Steve.
Great to be on, and thank you for inviting me.
Steve, in a second, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of tell the story about your connection to Dr. Brzezinski and your wife's connection to Dr. Brzezinski. Just to review what we've talked about so far. Dustin Canary was just on the line. We listened to the congressional testimony from his mother that was in the Brzezinski film. We've talked a little bit about the trial. Dustin, I got goosebumps. He was talking about how he actually said a few words to the prosecutor and let her know who he was, which I thought was fantastic. And we've been talking a little bit about the FDA, a little bit about Big Pharma, a little bit about how the Texas Medical Board is wasting people's money and things like that. So again, I want to turn it over to you and just maybe if you could tell our listeners about your connection to Dr. Brzezinski.
Okay. Well, very quickly, I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest story of how we got involved. My wife is a patient of Dr. Brzezinski. She presented with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 26 years ago. Before we met Dr. Brzezinski, we went all over the United States to every major cancer research center dealing with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I'll give you the big names that you know: USC, Stanford Medical, UCLA, Dana-Farber Cancer Center, and Harvard at Harvard University. So I'm only telling you that because I want you to know that her diagnosis was real. This is not something made up. Every specialist, the top people in the United States, said there is very little, almost nothing that can be done to save your life. You are going to, this disease will recur and will recur again. We can give you some chemotherapy and some radiation as the tumors start to grow, but eventually your disease will become resistant to the treatment and you will die. So we just kept looking, and then we ended up at Harvard Medical, and here's what they proposed as a treatment. And this was Dr. Lee Nadler is his name. He's was at that time, 25 years ago, a fine young researcher, clinician, and he said, we're going to do an autologous bone marrow. We would like you to participate in this study that we're doing. It's autologous bone marrow transplant. So they would take out her bone marrow. They would clean the bone marrow. That's the term they use, clean or purge the bone marrow of all the cancer cells, and then freeze the bone marrow, which they would give back to her later. In the meantime, while they were doing that, they would give my wife massive chemotherapy and massive radiation, what they call TBI, total body irradiation. She would receive as much radiation over the course of 3 days as people that were within 1 mile of ground zero at Hiroshima. And the reason they do this is to kill every single cancer cell in the body. If they leave even one cell, the disease will recur. They said to us at that time, we will bring you as close to death as we possibly can, and then when your bone marrow has been killed, your bone marrow is dead from all the radiation and chemo we're giving you, we're going to unfreeze the bone marrow that we took out previously, and we cleaned it, and we're going to give you back your own bone marrow, and hopefully, if it takes and it thrives, you will gradually come back to life, and hopefully you will be cancer-free.
I'm hearing a lot of ifs and hopefullys in there.
A lot of ifs, a lot of downside, a lot of horrific side effects. Reduction in the size of her heart, damage to the kidneys, damage to the lungs, damage to the bladder. They said basically you will not be the same, but you'll be alive. We talked to many people who had gone through the disease, through the treatment, most of whom have now passed away. In fact, probably all of them have passed away. The most famous person that went through this, he was a presidential candidate, and many people in your audience are probably too young to remember, but if you Google his name, Tsongas, Paul Tsongas, Tsongas, who actually ran against Bill Clinton in the Democratic primary back in 1992.
Oh, wow.
And we actually met him and talked to him, and he highly recommended this because he was alive. Well, about 2 or 3 years later, he passed away from the disease and also from the side effects of the treatment. Now, I want to just get one more point in here, and then we'll bring it up to what's going on, what she did do, and what's going on now. We were told this is highly experimental. It was not FDA approved. It was very, very expensive, about $250,000. But they told us, don't worry about it. We know how to bill the insurance companies, so you don't need to worry about it. So I'm not going to make any statements. I'll let people draw their own conclusions from that and compare and contrast that to what I'm going to tell you about Dr. Brzezinski. We were fortunate enough to be steered in the right direction to meet Dr. B in 1992. And my wife started on his treatment immediately. It's a non-toxic treatment. It works with the body. It is a drug. It's not a potion. It's not a diet. It's not acupuncture. It is an actual drug that Dr. Brzezinski discovered about 45 years ago. But it works with the body to shut down the chemical switches in the body that cause cancer. And at the same time, it turns on the chemical switches in the body which reduce cancer. They're called tumor suppressor genes. So he shuts down with this chemical called anti-neoplastins. He shuts down the cancer cells, which are called the cancer-causing genes, which are the oncogenes, and he stimulates and reinvigorates, turns on the tumor suppressors, which are the switches that control the cancer. All of us have all of these going on in our body all the time, and we have a mechanism that controls it. When the mechanism goes out of whack, that's when cancer is allowed to grow. So bottom line, and then I'll let you get in here with your questions and all of that. It's now 26 years after my wife started treatment. She was pronounced in remission in 1994, I believe. So 21, 22, that's 22 years. She's cancer-free. She's alive, healthy, vibrant, the mother of 3 and the grandmother of 3 kids that she thought she would never see graduate high school. Now they're all living perfectly normal lives. They have careers, and they have children of their own. And she never suffered one day of hair loss, of nausea, of vomiting, of anything associated with standard cancer treatment. So that's our connection and my connection to Dr. Brzezinski. In a nutshell, he saved my wife's life, treated her non-toxically, and she's here with me today.
Wow. And Steve, how many times have you or Mary Jo told your story before Congress? Or testimony in general in trials, et cetera?
Yeah, I caught a little bit of what you were saying, Tony, and it is amazing to me. And you can add to that list beyond Vioxx, beyond all the other things. Also put in there the one of the best ones, aside from Dr. B, but one of the biggest ones is H. pylori. You know that story, right?
No, let's tell the listeners about that.
H. pylori, this has nothing to do with my story, but I love this story because it's so, you would think you were living on another planet. It's so absurd. Same agency, this same group that we look to protect us, the American Medical Association, the same group, these ABCs of government agencies, The doctor who discovered H. pylori, it's a bacteria that exists in the gut of people. It's one of those bad bacteria, and it's the root cause of stomach ulcers. Before that, before the 1980s and the 1990s, we were told that it's acidic diet, it's drinking, it's smoking, and you have to take milk of magnesium, you have to coat the stomach, and you have to have surgery. And it turns out what you need is a simple course of antibiotics, 3 or 4 days, 5 days of antibiotics, and you completely cure the stomach ulcers, 90% of all stomach ulcers. The guy who discovered H. pylori lost his medical license, and he was at one of the big medical schools, one of the big research centers. I want to say Harvard, but I'm not 100% sure. He actually lost his medical license and was totally ridiculed by the medical industry, by the AMA. FDA got involved, and then it turned out in the late 1990s it was proven true, and he ended up winning huge prizes after that. But for 15 years, this guy was totally shunned by the industry and by his peers. So it's unbelievable. So funny.
Wow. Yeah, we're coming up to a break here, Steve. Could you stay with us for another segment?
I sure can.
Beautiful. And the one you were referencing, it was discovered by Drs. Barry Marshall and Robin Warren of Perth, Australia in 1982. So that's the H. pylori. Stay tuned here on Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior.
Google and Apple are at it again, this time with spy planes that can photograph objects as small as iPhones. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and if the thought of an airborne camera leering at your backyard creeps you out, stay tuned.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
The next time you go sunbathing in your backyard, check the sky first. Google or Apple may have spy planes with cameras buzzing overhead, and they could be filming you. Google's airborne cameras capture images so detailed they can almost count the hairs on your head. And Apple has military-grade cameras so powerful they can spy into your home through skylights and windows. Google says it needs all this power to produce new 3D maps with more detail than Google Earth's satellite images. But who really needs this? I say we need to shut down Google's big eyes before there's no place left to hide from the watchers. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
About chemtrails.
Live Free Speech Radio, LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. I am Ryan Metzel. I've had some amazing guests so far, and we're going to go back. Steve, are you still there?
Yes, I am, Ryan.
Beautiful. And we also have Eric Marola in the studio with us now, too. So this is going to be a great last couple segments here.
How you doing, Steve?
I'm good, Eric. How are you?
Long time. I'm very well.
These are the true spiritual warriors, Tony and Ryan, and it's so nice to be a part of this.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. So, could you finish telling a little bit of your story, Steve, that we got started before the break?
Sure. Just to finish it up real quickly, so I sort of laid out for you what Mary Jo was faced with in terms of her treatment options, which were very limited, with horrific side effects, which we are both convinced, and the data back it up on other people that went through this bone marrow transplant, that she would not be with us today. So we found Dr. Brzezinski. He's invented this drug called anti-neoplastin. She went on anti-neoplastins, and within Literally within weeks, we knew it was working. She had tumors all throughout her body, and they started to disappear. But because they were everywhere in her body, it did take a long time. It was 23 months of treatment, but it's a gentle, non-toxic treatment, very few side effects. The only real side effect is that she would get tired, and the antidote for the side effect was she would take a nap. Now, you tell me any other cancer treatment, quote-unquote conventional cancer treatment, that is the remedy for the side effects. So there's no nausea, no vomiting, no hair loss. It's a fabulous, absolutely fabulous treatment. And the sad part is that the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, a federal agency, arguably one of the largest federal agencies behind the Department of Defense, which, as you guys were talking about, this is an agency that's empowered to oversee everything we put into our mouths, everything we use in our body, food and drug. You can imagine the influence that they have on our lives. And the FDA has decided they don't like this treatment. They don't like Dr. Burzynski, and as a result, they're not going to allow any of his patients, a few of whom you've heard today, and I can assure you there are dozens and dozens and hundreds, even to the thousands more that have sought treatment and are alive today as a result of Dr. B's treatment. And the FDA does not want to allow this treatment to stand and to be on the market.
And so many of those patients were just in Austin protesting, before the trial each day starting May 3rd. Eric, can you talk a little bit about, so I don't know that we gave Eric a proper introduction. So Eric Merola is the director of the film that we're going to be showing here at Brave New Books, 5 p.m. tonight. Come on out. You will not regret it. In fact, we showed this film at the Alamo Drafthouse last Saturday, and we had a little over 100 people in attendance, and nobody left afterwards because they wanted to continue the conversation. It's one of those documentaries that could potentially have the potential to change your life. It's absolutely fascinating. So anyways, Eric, could you let people know? Yeah.
If I can just get a word in here, and then I'll turn this over to Eric and sit by quietly. Just in terms of what you were saying, not only did people stay there for the Q&A afterward, but I want to, at this point, just a shout out and a big thank you from all of us. You had so many people that saw the film that came out to support the patients of Dr. Burzynski. Dr. Burzynski is now on trial. I don't know if you've talked about that. Your Texas State Medical Board, an equally evil organization as the Food and Drug Administration, is now moving, and there are hearings and a licensure trial going on to stop Dr. Burzynski from practicing medicine by removing his medical license. So you had people that came to this, your listeners, that came to the showing of the film that Eric had made, and they came out to protest with us and to help us. Many of them sat in the courtroom with us, and now they're just as outraged as we are. So we'll get into this as we go.
Well, and I appreciate you giving me credit for that, but I think really Eric deserves all the credit for that because the film is such a film that it will make you want to act and it will stir up emotions in you. And Eric tells the story absolutely wonderfully. But my question for you, Eric, if people want to catch up on the trial, see what's happened the last couple of days, maybe see pictures of protests, where could you direct them to so they can see updates?
At the moment, the only place you can go is the Burzynski the Movie Facebook page.
Okay.
Because I've just been so busy that I haven't had a chance to write a blog but I have been trying to post photographs and little short videos from my phone. I have a couple wide angle GoPros on the witness stand.
Nice.
So I posted an awesome picture of Mary Michaels as well as Mary Jo Siegel, Steve's wife, late last night when I got home. But I haven't really had a chance to do anything that'll happen when I get home. But if anyone's interested, if you go to burzynskimovie.com, which is, I don't know, I can try to spell it for you, BURZYNSKI movie.com. I will be blogging extensively about it and posting a lot of the footage online. So just follow the Facebook page or, subscribe to the blog, and you'll see it. So, or even the Twitter account. So Burzynski Movie Twitter.
And again, I'll mention it. Eric will be here for the event at 5 p.m. at Brave New Books. This is an incredible documentary. This isn't just some independent film that, a couple people have seen. This thing's gotten millions of views. It was on Netflix for a couple years. It is an absolutely outstanding movie and a must see. I know it sounds like a shameless plug, but I just can't say enough because the movie's had a great impact on my life and so many other people. It's really eye opening. You got to come down tonight to Brave New Books, 5 p.m. and check out the film.
Absolutely. Eric, I guess if you could take us a little bit through, we've had some pretty amazing, actually, directors on the past few weeks. So, Thomas Dickens and David Burke, one of my co-hosts, who's now on a plane to Australia, and several other, local local here, Austin movie producers. But take us through the movie. You know, what got you started, how the process went, you know, challenges. Definitely would love to hear about some of that.
Sure. Without being too long-winded, you know, basically around, I think for a lot of us in this room even, and looking around on the walls, living in New York City when 9/11 hit, it sort of rattled my cage and changed my perspective on everything. I went from sort of selfish, narcissistic artist to activist almost overnight. And between that and dealing with immigration with my wife and being audited by the IRS and just being harassed by this government, I just sort of, you know, was on a mission to sort of find out what else is going on that is, you know, rather shady. Anyway, so living in Manhattan, I always liked reading material, and I usually preferred nonfiction reading material when I rode the subways home after work. I was always working late. It was always when the subways were not running on normal schedules. You know, it would take you forever to get home, and without a book, it was just miserable. So I sort of walked by the Strand bookstore, kind of, you know, not quite as like this place, but, you know, it's just they had a lot of used books and a lot of variety of stuff. And out on the sidewalk, the books that they weren't afraid of anyone stealing for, you know, they sold for $1, sat a book by a guy named Ralph Moss called The Cancer Industry. This had been initially published around 1980, and it kept being revised over the years. But in that book was a chapter on Brzezinski. But to back up for a moment, Ralph Moss was the public relations director of Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in the 1970s. At the time, Sloan Kettering was the largest cancer center in this country, and they still are very highly respected and huge. But I think MD Anderson, I can't remember, somebody has taken the number one spot actually. Anyway, so he was a public relations director for Sloan Kettering. He was a background in literature. He was not a scientist. He was just a science writer, if you would. And he was there and this all happened right after President Nixon launched the war on cancer. And this story is very relevant to Brzezinski. All of this kind of ties together. It gives you an idea how long this type of thing has been going on. So the war on cancer was enacted, and a lot of fresh new guys were at Sloan Kettering, very progressive guys. And somebody, at the time, there was 70,000 to 100,000 people going to Tijuana, Mexico to get this quack therapy called Laetrile, which is a derivative of apricot pits. It's basically a runoff of the apricot canning industry. It's like a throwaway byproduct that, you know, no one had a use for. Anyway, so they, you know, having a war on cancer, they said, we got to test this thing, you know, and they had no inkling that it was going to do anything positive. So they had the biggest cancer center in the country do it, Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. They had an old Japanese guy who was
Yep, and we're coming to a break here, so more with Eric Merola here after the break on Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. Welcome back, everyone. This is the last segment here on Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. I am Ryan Metzel. We're chatting with Director Eric Merola here after the break. Be sure to come down and see his movie, 5 o'clock, Brave New Books, here in Austin, Texas. And so, would you like to continue your story, Eric?
Sure, I'll wrap it up. I know you don't have a lot of time left in this segment, but basically, this guy named Ralph Moss is working at Sloan Kettering, and he was friends with the lead scientist on the Laetrile studies. They studied it in mice. They studied this substance, Laetrile, in mice for 5 years, and every single mouse model they can come up with in double-blind mouse studies. That means the person giving them injections has no idea which mice are getting Laetrile, which mice are getting the placebo. And it stopped the spread of cancer 80% of the time. And in the mice that they gave it to that were supposed to develop cancer, it prevented it 80% of the time, all the time, no matter what, repeatedly. It could not kill the major primary tumor, but it would stop the cancer basically at the blood level. It was able to knock it out. Anyway, keep it from forming. So the short is, you know, Ralph, being the head of PR, he was asked to write what he knew was a lie, was that it didn't work. Because they couldn't allow it out. There's no way to patent it, no way to regulate it.
Can't patent nature.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Sure you can't. So anyway, that's the short of it. So Ralph got fired when he blew the whistle. He tried everything he could to like properly, you know, leak the documents. It came to a head. He had to blow the whistle and come clean about what he knew. No one cared, just like so many things. And it was a big awakening for him, as it has, like my movie was for you, and as the things I discussed earlier was for me. And so he actually took it upon himself to travel around the country and the world looking at other so-called alternative cancer therapies. Brzezinski was one of them. And I read his book, and I had never made a documentary. I always wanted to, but if I wanted to make a documentary, I wanted to do something that hadn't been already done. There's so many documentaries about so many things already. Like I wasn't going to make another, say, marijuana documentary. Why? You know, I wasn't going to make another, say, you know, I don't know, anything you can think of, you know, documentary. But no one had really made a documentary of this nature when you're talking about a man who has a patented cure for cancer that the FDA is supposedly cooperating with. But while he's simultaneously up against the federal state governments, while the National Cancer Institute is trying to steal it, and it was chaos. And I couldn't believe that. I'd never heard of it. So in short, I made the movie about it, and I just didn't realize I had a knack for storytelling as much as I did because it was a very, very convoluted story. And if you try to sit down and explain to someone, they would just think look at you like you had 3 heads. So I managed to get up all the proof and all the documents. Brzezinski's secretarial assistant spent hours for me digging through his filing cabinets, finding all this stuff for me. Luckily, Brzezinski is a pack rat. He doesn't like to throw anything away. Anything that might be of relevance, he saves. And it's amazing. So, he had it all. When I asked him, he told me this happened or that happened. I said, you have proof of that. Boom, here you go. Here you go. It was incredible. So it was almost, more than I could have put in a film. So by the way, speaking of that, since I brought it up, a lot of people don't know about this, but on the Brzezinski movie website, if anyone is skeptical about this, if they see it or hearing me, I actually have the transcript of the whole movie online for free. And every single document I use, plus many more documents, is there as PDFs.
Including medical records, right?
And all the medical records. I got permission from everyone involved that I interviewed to release their medical records. What I mean by that is the third-party diagnosis from, say, Mayo Clinic or MD Anderson or wherever, as well as all of the radiology reports that are not Brzezinski's responsibility. They're a third-party organization that does the MRIs and things like that. So, and of course, Brzezinski's internal documents as well. So, and there's a lot of extra footage. Steve is on. Is Steve still on the line? Yeah. No?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was going to say, Mary Jo Siegel, as Steve was saying, his wife, yes, she's not in the movie that much, but I have a link to the 48 Hours segment when Steve and Mary Jo were running around D.C. and Mary Jo's oncologist was on camera saying there's no way she's going to be cured with this stuff. And boom, she comes out of the big giant whatever CAT scan machine, I can't remember what it's called, right there on camera. Boom, full remission. And it's really good stuff. So all that stuff is centralized on the Brzezinski movie website. If you click on videos, there's just an arsenal of stuff I've collected over the years that I just want to release to everyone for free if anyone really wants to get into this.
And that's BrzezinskiMovie.com?
Correct.
Is that right? That's the website?
Correct.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
I was going to say it's also, the Brzezinski movie, the YouTube channel as well. If you subscribe to that, I've always got stuff coming out. So
I appreciate you mentioning that, Eric. And I want to throw a question to Steve and ask Steve, you started off telling the story about all the prestigious medical experts that originally gave you some advice. And you described how today you're happy you didn't take that original advice. Did you and Mary Jo ever get the opportunity to kind of circle back around to those original doctors or to those original facilities and see their reaction to what they really said was impossible, really?
Well, yes, that's a great question, Tony. As a matter of fact, we did. We really never left. We're out in the Los Angeles area. So we settled on UCLA as her sort of secondary and support hospital medical center because Dr. Brzezinski is located in Houston. We would take the medicine back to Los Angeles, but Mary Jo needed follow-up scans, follow-up consultations. So we did that at UCLA with her doctor, who was Dr. Peter Rosen, head of lymphoma research and head of the lymphoma clinic at UCLA for years and years and years. And he was the original doctor that gave Mary Jo her diagnosis, her terminal diagnosis, and he said, we're going to do everything we can to treat you, palliative treatment, whatever we can to keep you alive as long as we can. A little chemo here, a little radiation there, a little chemo and radiation together, but eventually your disease is going to become resistant to the chemotherapy and the tumors will kill you. And he said, we asked him even, Tony, we went as far as to say, well, what if she cleans up her diet, goes on an organic diet and carrot juice and all of these things? He said, no. He said, there's no such thing really as a spontaneous remission. They talk about it in the data, but I've never seen it in 30 years of medical practice and research. I've never seen it. So to get to the answer to your question, is this guy first of all, Mary Jo never had, I want to be perfectly clear, she never had any chemo, not one drop of chemotherapy. She never had one rad of radiation. The only treatment she received was Dr. Brzezinski's anti-neoplastins.
No surgery either, Steve?
Pardon me?
No surgery either for Mary Jo?
She had surgery originally before we knew she had cancer. This cancer is such a disgusting cancer. It hides in the body, and you don't know what it is. Prior to her diagnosis, she had a complete blockage in her lower bowel. So she'd had to have 30 inches of her small intestine removed. This was before we knew what caused it, and it was caused by the cancer. So initially, she did have cancer. But remember, lymphoma is all through the body. It only presented itself in her gut, but she had it in her neck, in all of her lymph nodes. She had it in her groin, and down all the lymph nodes that go down the leg. Everywhere in the body, you can see on the scans where she had this.
Stage 4 as well. Unbelievable. And so what were these doctors' reactions when they saw her healthy again, which is what they were saying couldn't happen happen.
They saw the results of the scans, Tony, and they saw these tumors shrinking, literally melting away. And then, as Eric said, we were followed by 48 Hours, which was Dan Rather's show on CBS. They got wind of this, and they followed us for about 3 weeks. And they were there when Mary Jo had the final CAT scan. She came out of that CAT scan. We went immediately to Dr. Rosen's office, and he said, "My dear, you are in remission." So the producer of the show, or the on-camera personality, said, "So do you give Dr. Brzezinski credit for her remission?" And you know what he said? "No." And he said, "Well, what was it?" He said, "A spontaneous remission," when he had told us 5 years earlier that he had never seen one. Well, aren't we lucky?
Must have been a miracle, right?
Start playing the lottery.
So, Tony, real quickly, I just want to get in here, and this is where it's so wonderful. You guys are in Austin, Texas. The people of Austin were so welcoming to our group and so seemingly understanding of the plight, because sometimes it seems like our group and Dr. Brzezinski's patients are just in it themselves and being harassed and no support. And the people of Austin were so gracious and so supportive, and you were at the tip of that. So I want to thank you for that. But now we have to take it to the next step. The Texas Medical Board is trying to take Dr. Brzezinski's license away. The Texas Medical Board is one of them. It's an FDA at a smaller level in the state of Texas, there to, quote unquote, protect the people of Texas. And your listeners are smart enough to know we don't want this kind of protection. We want to be able to choose. We are all smart people. If we know what we're taking and there's full disclosure, we don't care. It's not their business to be inside of our bodies. We want to have access to medical freedom, and they're trying to restrict that by taking Dr. Brzezinski's license away. So there is a trial that went on last week. Mary Jo testified on Friday, as you know, and I'm sure that will be up after the trial is over. Eric will post it online. But we want to stop this from happening again. So the trial continues this coming week from Monday to Thursday. And I would just ask if any of you can come out in the morning. We're out there in the mornings. Come in and drop into the trial. It's on the 4th floor, and you can give them the address of where it is and see where your tax dollars are going. This is the most inept group of people I have seen. They are wasting, aside from the fact that what they're doing is evil, they are wasting your money. There is no reason for it. All they are trying to do is tire Dr. Brzezinski out, wear him down financially. They don't have a chance of winning because they have no facts on their side. It's all bogus. They are threatening doctors that work for Dr. Brzezinski. They're threatening those doctors so they can, and threatening to take their licenses away unless they will testify against Dr. Brzezinski. And this nonsense has got to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is if the good people of Texas come out, put their foot down, and say enough. Enough is enough, and not anymore. And then eventually, we're in the process now of putting together a petition and a phone call campaign and an email campaign to Governor Abbott's office, because Governor Abbott and the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Texas could stop this tomorrow. It's as easy as that. Just cut off the funding for Texas Medical Board. Let them get back to work to going after the real quacks and the real.
Absolutely, Steve. I appreciate it. We're coming here to the end of the show. Special thanks to Steve, Dustin, and everyone else on the show today. Stay tuned. Come see the movie that Eric produced here and directed at 5 o'clock.